As many students head back to the classroom, the social media guru TikTok wants to share a few school tips to make strong online choices easier. Here to help us be cyber smart is Interim General Manager of TikTok U.S. Data Security, Andy Bonillo. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you. How are you today?
Yeah, we're doing good, and I'm glad we're talking about this. So, Andy, how can we be cyber smart when it comes to passwords?
Well, there's a couple components to passwords that I think are really valuable. One is they need to be strong and unique and complex, and don't share them. But
Yeah.
the other thing is, we want to make sure you're augmenting the password with two-factor verification, and having that second step of authentication is really important component to put on top of just the password. And we want to make sure that, especially if you're in the virtual classroom setting, as you're going back to school, have passwords and waiting rooms enabled. And then I think lastly, from another online safety tip that's really important is enabling the auto updates on your devices to make sure you have the latest security updates and software updates is really, really critical to remove some of the gaps that might exist for an attacker to try to take advantage of.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm also glad you mentioned the two-step authentication process because I tend to not want to do it just because it's inconvenient, but it just makes it that much more difficult to people to get access to your account. So it's smarter to do. And if I get a weird email, text, or DM, what should I keep an eye out for?
Yeah, attackers are trying to socially engineer you technically, and so, they're trying to prey on your speed of how frequent your communications are. So look out for, typos, look out for, emails or text messages that are coming from contacts that you don't know. So really look for things that just are unfamiliar to you.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand it and you don't trust it, like don't click on it or don't reply or engage in a communication with it. A lot of this you can learn at Be Cyber Smart, which is our back to school campaign, and we started Be Cyber Smart last year in advance of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. For all that don't know, that's in October, and so we really felt it was important with everybody going back to school to make sure our kids are. My kids went back this week, and so I know they're going to be online with their, doing their homework. They're going to be online with their friends, and so we want to make sure they and our other billion users are safe as they're online. There's another couple of resources that I think are helpful for folks. One is at TikTok Tips in the application itself. There's a whole host of great content there. Also, TikTok isn't just a great entertainment platform; it's also a really amazing learning platform. So if you go to Learn on TikTok, we had over 350 billion views of learning content. So there's amazing content there. I would also steer people to take a look at the Global Cyber Alliance. We did a step-by-step guide with them to make sure that folks understand how to lock their online accounts down and secure their online identity. And then, I really am also focused on making sure that we bring awareness to cybersecurity as a profession. So it's one thing to do the controls, you, yourself, us at TikTok, but it's another thing to make sure we educate folks to understand that there's also an amazing career field that exists here. And so, it's a mission-driven environment, it's fun, it's impactful, and I would really, encourage people to take a serious look at the career field of cybersecurity, and I'd love to talk, a little bit more about that.
And I know a lot of friends who have recently had their social media accounts hacked on different platforms. Are there any final tips on how to prevent that from happening?
Yeah, it's really important that you do the two-step factor authentication, right? Because that's where a lot of account takeover exists. It's through poorly, unsecured accounts, weak passwords, no two-factor authentication. Like that's a really big part of protecting from account takeover.
Perfect. Andy, thank you so much for joining us this morning and keeping us cyber smart. For more cyber smart tips, check out gcatoolkit.org.